and welcome back to A Couple of Silmarils, where we are going through Tolkien's Silmarillion for the very first time, and then coming on here and talking about it with you. This week, we are going over chapters 9 and 10, where the Noldor Elves flee Aman, and we learn more about the Sindar Elves, the elves that stayed in Middle-earth. So just to catch us up, Ethan, could you kind of tell us where we're at in Valinor right now?
Yeah, so last episode, you'll remember, or maybe you don't remember, that basically things got very dark, and I mean that literally. Morgoth, or Melkor, and Ungoliant, the spider creature that is helping him, snuck in and took out the trees of Valinor, essentially slashed him with a spear, and Ungoliant sucked them dry of all their nutrients, and then they left Middle-earth. So everything got very dark. The light is gone, and so that was the end. And a couple of the Valar tried to go catch him, but it was too dark for them to see. So the quick attack they made was not successful, and Melkor and Ungoliant got away. And as we learn, they get away from Aman and move to Middle-earth.
That brings us to chapter 9. Everybody is very sad. At the time that this happened, there was a council going on, and most of the people of Valinor were at that council. And they're gathered around. They call it the Ring of Doom. It's a sacred circular place in Valinor, just outside of Valmar's gates, where the Valar held their high councils and passed judgment. It's not a magical ring. That's not happened yet. So many voices were lifted in lamentation. Everyone is sad, especially Yavanna, because the Tree of Lights were mostly of her making, and they are dying or dead. And so Yavanna says that the light of the trees has officially passed away, and the only light left of the trees is in the Silmarils of Fëanor. And she says that if she had a little bit of the Silmarils light, she would be able to maybe bring these trees to life. So everyone...
So who do they have to ask for the Silmarils?
Yes, everyone is looking at Fëanor. We, as you hopefully remember, Fëanor is a little not happy right now. He's, what's the word? He's out in his...
He'd been exiled.
He's exiled in Formanos.
Banned from.
But he did get called to this council. He's the only one of his people.
And I believe
there.
This was actually a feast they were holding, not a council. I think it turns into a council.
Oh, okay.
But
I think you're right. Yeah, they're all feasting together.
They're feasting. Mm-hmm. He had been commanded to come to the feast, though, so he is an unhappy attendee of the feast. But
yeah, he's not happy. And so Manwë does ask him to give Yavanna the Silmarils. Fëanor doesn't speak. He's, weighing in his mind what he should be doing. Several of the Valar beg him to give it over, especially Tolkis. He's like, come on, there's nothing to think about. We need to save our country or our world. But Aule actually calms them down and tells them not to be too hasty about asking him to do this, because Aule, I feel like he actually understands how precious the Silmarils are to Fëanor. And so he essentially says this request is bigger than, So Fëanor, he does answer bitterly. Like we said, he's not happy. He might be able to unlock the jewels, but he would never be able to make them again. And he does say that if he does break them, it would break his heart. And he feels like he would die. And he says specifically that he would be the first of the Eldar to die. And what does Mandos say?
He says not the first. Everyone kind of looks at him like the crazy person. It says, I don't really know what that meant, but we're going to keep going.
Yeah, so no one knows what that means. We don't know what that means as of right now, but we will figure that out in a minute, what he meant by that. Fëanor brooded in silence. He started listening to Melkor's lies. This started making him think that the Valar just wanted him for his Silmarils and they didn't care about him. So he decides he is not going to give up the Silmarils of his own free will.
Yeah, and to back up just a minute there, my question was, hey, why don't they just make the trees again? And Yavanna essentially says there are some things you can only do once in the course of existence, and that was something that she had thought of beforehand with Iluvatar when they were singing the song, singing the tune before they had gone down into Ea. And so she's like, I can only do that once in existence. Fëanor says there are some things I can only make once in existence as well. The Silmarils are one of them, and it would crush me too much to give them up, so I will not. And he says, if you try to take them by force, you just prove to me that you are the same as Melkor.
Yeah. He curses Melkor, gives him the name Morgoth for the first time, and I believe the rest of the book, we use the word, well, Tolkien uses the word Morgoth mostly. And so this is...
Well, why does he curse Melkor? This is good. He gets the news from Formanos.
Oh, I skipped a whole paragraph.
I figured we missed
Yes,
something.
I did. I scrolled past it. Yes, this is very important. This is what makes sense what Mandos was saying. There comes a messenger from Formanos, and that's where Fëanor's stronghold is. The messenger says this blind darkness comes, so obviously that's Melkor and Ungoliant. He comes into Fëanor's house. He kills his father, Finwë, who is the king of the Noldor. So he kills the king, and he spills the first blood in Aman. So that kind of makes sense why Mandos already knew that there was already someone dead, because people who die go to Mandos's halls, and that's kind of a good thing to remember. That's why Mandos knows who is dying.
That's a good point, yeah.
Melkor broke the stronghold in Formanos, and he took all of the jewels of the Noldor, and the Silmarils were gone. So he also takes the Silmarils.
So Fëanor, he says, no, you can't have them. And then he realizes they weren't really his anymore anyway. That's when he curses Melkor, calls him Morgoth, and essentially he's going to be referred to as Morgoth. It seems like the rest of the Silmarillion. And he is distraught over his father's death. He loved his father dearly, and if you remember, his father loved him dearly, maybe a little too dearly. Where he
was definitely the favorite child.
He was quite obviously the favorite, and he did some rash things in that regard. But that's where we leave. So a lot of sadness in the world, literal darkness, and then their one chance of here's where we can have some hope is crushed kind of twice. Fëanor says no, and then, oh, well, even if they convince him later on, he doesn't have him anymore.
Yeah, so of course he's mad at Melkor and gives him the name Morgoth for the first time. Fëanor, not only is he mad, he's mad at Morgoth or Melkor, but he's also gets, in his bitterness, gets very mad at Manwë for making him come to Tanaquetil, because in his pride, he thinks that if Melkor came and he was at Formanos, that he would have been able to defend the Silmarils. So that is left to us to decide in our own heads.
Fëanor is just looking for reasons to not like the Valar, and so that's just another one he chalked up. Like, hey, if you hadn't made me be at this feast, then I would have kicked Morgoth's butt or something. It seems like is what he was assuming would happen.
Sounds pretty prideful, I think. But
seems like Tolkien pretty much leads in with like that probably wasn't going to happen. He doesn't say that, but it's like he thought in his arrogance that was a chance or something like that. That no, I wasn't going to write it that way.
Yeah. So he flees into the dark to grieve his father, and Yavanna's also grieving and fearing that the light of the Valinor is gone forever.
Yeah. And one thing that they mention is that, and what Addie's going to get into next is and I guess we should get to after we hear more about Fëanor, but they're like, Fëanor's actions might have been quite different if he hadn't, when he learned his father had died and the Silmarils were taken, if he hadn't said no to the Valar initially.
Yeah.
But
his heart might have been a little more softened.
Yeah, but I think so. And if that might have been what he needed to see, that that Morgoth was different than the Valar, because he had already rejected the Valar, and so it kind of left him a little bit pinched as to like, oh, go back and say, oh, the Valar are good or are better than Morgoth now.
He'd already kind of shown his bitterness.
Yeah,
I think. So then the chapter switches to Morgoth and Ungoliant. They've just, stole the Silmarils, and they're fleeing from Valinor north between the mountains of the Pelori and the Great Sea. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we do have some maps, and I would encourage you to watch, because these next chapters are a lot better understood with a map. So we're going to try to, if you're listening, we're going to try to explain as much as we can. But if you're watching, you can watch us point to places on the map. And Ethan and I both found that very helpful as we're reading to follow the map. So I'm going to pull that up here. The mountains of the Pelori, as we remember, they go all the way around. All of these are the mountains of the Pelori, and this is the Great Sea. So right now, all we know is that he moves north up here and crosses through the Pelori, and then it says they made it to Aman, the wider land that was cold and filled with ice. So this is up here. They're heading towards here. You can see Aman right here. So they're heading up towards here. They make it to the dangerous crossing of Helcarax. Is that how you would say that? Helcaraxe. And this is that crossing. So this is where the only place where Middle Earth and Valinor connect. And so you can see that happening. This is a very, very dangerous and treacherous journey. It mentions it's filled with grinding ice. So it's interesting that the ice is like moving probably with the waters, and you have to kind of cross it, and it's probably really cold. And so it's a really hard journey.
Yes, yeah.
This brings them to the northern outer lands, and they continue on to Angband. So you can see Angband is up here. And this is where Ungoliant decides to make her move. So we'll pull the maps away for a second. What does Ungoliant do?
So Ungoliant is like, hey, you need to pay up now. I've helped you. I want stuff. You told me you would give with both. I asked you to give with both hands, whatever I want, and you said you would. And so she's like, give me what you stole at Formanos. And so he goes through and he starts one by one. Morgoth does, giving her the gems he got from Formanos. And eventually he uses all of those, and his other hand is the Silmarils. And she's like, I said both hands. One hand's behind your back. Show me what's in. I think it's your right hand. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he's getting his hand is burning because of the light of the Silmarils in his hand. So he's getting injured, painfully injured right now as he's holding these back from her. And so she essentially just covers him in great darkness. I didn't quite get what it was, like a cloak, a web, or whatnot, and just puts incredible pain on him. And so he ends up screaming very, very loud. Very loud. In fact, if you go to the other map, the area they are...
the Beleriand map?
Yeah. Go to Lamoth.
Here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this land is called, I think it's like a play on the word lament. He goes there, and that is where she captures him, and he starts screaming.
And that scream is one that stays in this area. Like people that go in that area can still hear that scream.
That's
right?
That's what I said. Like you go there, you still hear echoes of that scream.
Yeah. So he's screaming. He's scared. It's Morgoth. It's Melkor, but he's actually scared. He screams so loud that the deep creatures underneath Angband hear him, and a Balrog comes out with its whips of flame, and doesn't necessarily defeat her, but scares Ungoliant, and she goes, she flees. She flees to Nan Dungortheb, the Valley of Dreadful Death, where there are actually other spiders or things in the form of spiders that she does breed with. And then it just kind of ends with no one knows the final fate of Ungoliant. So did you want to show where?
We can show where that was,
okay.
Yeah, since we mentioned it there. She goes to Dungoreth right there. And then you see Nan Dungoreth is right underneath there.
Okay, so this is where she's residing.
And so that's where she goes. Apparently a lot of the creatures from Angband that had been left, dark creatures, are there. And she breeds with them, creates a whole bunch of nasty little spiders and other things. Well, I guess spiders. And then she leaves, and they say no one's ever heard of her again. They just assume. The assumption is that some say she just ended up consuming herself. She just had a lust to consume power so much. So anyway, that area there is a scary area.
So the Silmarils do remain in the power of Morgoth. He gathers all of his servants at the ruins of Angband because remember, he hasn't been back to Angband since he was taken into captivity. And he kind of sees the strength that actually has been growing there. He forges for himself a crown of iron and he sets the Silmarils in that crown. What I found really interesting was that, like Ethan said, the Silmarils burn his hand. The Silmarils in the crown are actually very heavy, and it says it gives him a deadly weariness, but he never takes it off. So he's so prideful, even though they hurt him. He's going to keep that on his
like
head.
He's in constant pain because the Silmarils are so close to him.
Yeah.
So.
And it says he remains in the darkness of Angband and seldom leaves his throne. So probably because he's in a lot of pain too. So dumb.
So you have an angry guy who's also in pain all the time. So it's a great combination for a villain.
Yeah, great mixture there. So this moves the chapter back to Valinor. The Valar know that Morgoth has escaped. They remain in darkness in the Ring of Doom for a long time with the Maiar and the Vanir elves. And the Noldor, though, they leave and they go to Tirion to mourn. And we left Fëanor. He flees to grieve his father. Well, he comes back to Tirion. So Tirion is like the capital of the Noldor, where all the Noldor live. He comes back and he gathers as many Noldor as he can. And he uses his excellent wording and his skilled tongue. He's very good at convincing people. He starts talking about the death of his father, the theft of the Silmarils, and he kind of claims the kingship of Noldor because his father's dead, so now he's the king. And he does scorn the Valar, so he's trying to convince the Noldor elves that some of this is the Valar's fault. He uses his words to turn the Noldor against the Valar, saying that they couldn't even keep their enemies away. And then he's mentioned this before. He's also very concerned that Morgoth is a Valar too. So I don't know if this concern is kind of like, well, if this Valar can do these evil things, maybe the other Valar can, or they're capable or something. And so he calls his people to leave Valinor and to return to Cuivienen back to Middle-earth.
He does. Basically, they'll get a bunch of lights and torches and whatnot, and that's because the land's dark, but it looks like quite a mob at this point. And he is giving a rallying speech that will change the fate of the Noldor forever. Where he's like, "Here's what we're gonna do. Here's our action items." And if you're kind of one of the Noldor elves, an elf, anyone in general at that point, but you've seen a lot of darkness on the land. It seems like the Valar cannot protect you. You might not believe that they're evil, like Fëanor wants you to believe or alludes to, but you're at this point where you're like, I don't. It seems like our gods cannot protect us. So, what change do we need? And Fëanor comes right then. Like, I have the change you need. I have our action. And what's there for us here anyway? It's life's just got a lot worse. So he gives his speech like, let's get out of here.
Yeah. He also then swears a terrible oath. He's with his sons. They say that they are going to pursue with vengeance any Vala, demon, elf, or man that would hold or keep the Silmarils. And this oath is terrible because it was sworn to Iluvatar in the name of Iluvatar, and so this oath cannot be broken. So if anyone besides Fëanor or his sons gets the Silmarils, then they will pursue him, even if it's not an enemy. So it's kind of a sad oath. Fingolfin, remember Fëanor has two stepbrothers, Fingolfin and half-brothers, Fingolfin and Finarfin. They have the same dad, different mothers. Fingolfin stands up to Fëanor and draws his sword. Finarfin, who's always the one a little softer and wants to calm things down, he speaks softly. He tries to calm everyone down. And then the book just mentions that Galadriel was the only woman of the Noldor to stand tall and valiant, and she was actually eager and to be gone with her brother Fingon, who is Fingolfin's son. So Fingolfin did not really want to leave, but Fingon and Galadriel, his two kids, did. They were of the same mind.
Yeah, I think Galadriel is Finarfin's daughter, and Fingon is Fingolfin, so they're not. They're cousins.
They're cousins.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
And real quick, I forgot to note when Fëanor's rallying the elves, he mentions men to them, and a lot of the Eldar had not heard of the coming of men. And I can't remember. Maybe Morgoth told them, or I can't remember why Fëanor knows.
I think
that.
Morgoth.
He
did,
probably.
That's one
I
of
think
his
you're
lies
right. He said that.
He...
So he's like, they have another race that's coming that they are really more invested in anyway. So this is another reason for us to leave. So he's like, and we're going to be, one of the things he says is, we will come back and we'll be the Lords of Light. We're going to grab the Silmarils and we will become the Lords of Light, is what he promises his people. And then to your point on the oaths, like oaths were, I mean, an oath was a very serious thing, because they really said you can't break them and you live forever. So it doesn't,
for the elves.
Yeah, so you really don't die with oaths. That concept really isn't there. And obviously there's more death to come. But so it's a really big deal. Like when you have an oath and your entire life is there. I mean, you're talking eternity essentially at this point, fulfilling this oath.
So Fëanor does prevail after a long debate, and a great number of the Noldor elves leave in haste, but they did not all want to call Fëanor their king, and so they still preferred Fingolfin. So this kind of divided the elves again. There was a smaller host that followed Fëanor, and a greater host that followed Fingolfin. Once again, Fingolfin is very reluctant to leave, but left because his son Fingon urged him to.
Well, and remember, Fingolfin, when they made amends, Fëanor and Fingolfin made amends because earlier Fëanor had drew a sword on Fingolfin, and then that's why he got exiled to Formenos in the first place. And so when he came to the feast, he said, I forgive you and I'll follow you. He basically, Fingolfin said that, and Fëanor said, I hear you. And so because of that oath he made, I don't think he realized.
Fingolfin kind of had to.
Yes, I don't think he realized what he was getting into.
That's a good point. Finarfin, Fingolfin's brother, followed because he didn't want to leave his brother Fingolfin. So Finarfin would be the one who was the most reluctant to leave, but they all did.
So it's like they said, 10% of the Noldor stayed is what I got from that. So only a tithe left, which I think is 10%.
Oh, smart. Manwë was told of Fëanor's leaving, obviously not thrilled. And this is what he says. For the hour is evil, and your road leads to sorrow that ye do not foresee. The Valar would not give him aid to leave, but they did decide to not stop him from leaving. He was exiled because of this dark oath that he swore, and
exiled from Valinor, not just from the capital city. Like, you got to stay away for 12 years or whatever it was when he went to Formenos. He is gone from the continent.
Yeah, they're kind of like, well, you can't come back again. This did not faze Fëanor in his pride, and he was this kind of actually pushed him on. He's like, okay, fine, I really want to leave now. He encouraged his host to find freedom by fleeing with him. So they continued on in their march.
And then he kind of, at the end of it, he shows the Valar. He's really not, he doesn't think he necessarily needs their aid. He's like, hey, maybe I'm not as powerful as you guys, but I at least am not going to sit here. I'm going to attack Morgoth, this evil one. And who knows, maybe Eru has put in me a greater flame than he let you know. So he kind of appeals to their boss,
yes,
or throws that name around. Like, you don't know what I'm capable of. Maybe Iluvatar made me stronger than you think. So, so really, I mean, he is leaving. He is burning as many bridges as he can on his way out.
Yeah,
and taking as many people as he can with him.
And Manwë is kind of like, don't come back.
It's like, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Wow.
So they start going northward because they want to. Fëanor wants to follow Morgoth.
He pull up the map of both continents.
And so they start heading towards where Morgoth goes, but um, then Feanor's mind cools and he starts thinking clearly, and he realizes that there is no way that they are going to get across the sea without boats. So
here's Tyrion, the main city, and they start marching, probably this direction. It just says they go north towards Helcaraxe. Um,
yeah, and then they realize that they're not going to get across. So they start making their way to the Teleri because they know that the Teleri elves, who are back down a little bit further south and they're on the coast, they have boats. And so they go down to the Teleri, they make their way to Alquilande, and they plead with the Teleri, but the Teleri were unmoved. They don't like Fëanor's reasoning for leaving, and they would rather try to get them to change their mind and dissuade them than to give them boats. So Fëanor obviously gets mad. He speaks wrathfully of Olwe, wrathfully to Olwe, kind of being like, can you change their minds? And Olwe refuses. The boats of the Teleri are the same as the gems to the Noldor. So they prize these very highly. They would not give these boats away unless they felt a really, really big need. And this did not seem like good enough reason.
Ase helped them, the Maiar Ase helped them build them, and I think Olwe did as well. Umu did as well, I'm sorry.
No, I think it was Olwe and Asa.
Okay, gotcha. And so they did both start. I mean, they're a big deal. They're their prized possession. I don't think they're going to give them away from anything. Like this is part of our soul. These ships.
Olwe is the leader of the Teleri.
Yes, yeah. Olwe is. Yes, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, he's not. He's not a Valar.
He's not a Valar. Yeah, I get
so a lot of names. We haven't talked about him for a minute. So
and it's so close to Aule that I always think he is one, but he is the leader, and he calls. Well, Fëanor does decide to, just take the boats by force because at this point he just wants to leave and he doesn't care about anybody else. And the Teleri try to withstand them.
That starts as a wrestling match essentially, or shoving people in the sea.
Yes, pushing a lot in the sea. Swords were drawn. There was a bitter fight for the ships.
That's a big deal, though, right there. The swords were drawn. Like all this became the first war, and really only one person has been killed so far in all of Valinor, and that was Finwë.
And he was killed by Morgoth, not by another elf.
So that's a really big deal that swords were drawn.
I should have said swords were drawn, and then pause.
This is the perfect world is crumbling down.
Yeah, it was a pretty bitter fight. Noldor gets pushed back several times, but they were able to overcome the Teleri. Something too that I want to mention was that Fingolfin and Finarfin, they didn't really know what was happening. They thought the Teleri started the attack, and so they were kind of like, okay, we want to defend our people.
Well, they had been following behind, so Fëanor led the march, and then Fingolfin came behind and whatnot. So Fëanor starts this battle. Fingolfin has no idea what's going on. He shows up as there's a war going on, and so he's like, well, we side with the Noldor. And he doesn't really know what happened.
Yeah, he doesn't realize that he's attacking the Teleri for no good reason except that the Teleri didn't give them their boats. So that the Noldor do end up overcoming the Teleri and they get the boats, and many of the Teleri were wickedly slain. As the Noldor are drawing away, Olwe, the leader of the Teleri, he calls upon Asa for help. The Valar were not able to hinder the Noldor from leaving, like we said before. So Asa couldn't do anything. So Eowyn does, who's a Maiar, right? They, because they're Valar, I guess, can hinder the Noldor. And
right. She is a Maiar. Her Ase and Eowyn are the two Maiar that are paired together.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, but why can't Asa?
He can. He just listens. She doesn't listen.
All right. So Eowyn does bring a storm upon the sea, and it does wreck many of the ships. But the Noldor still are able to get through the storm and move forward. It's said by land and by sea, which I thought was interesting. I don't know what that meant.
I was confused by some of that geography they were talking about there as well.
They make it to the waste of Ahriman. They when they get there, they see a dark figure standing high upon the rock, and from the figure they hear a dark prophecy of the doom of the Noldor. That puts a lot of fear into many, but of course, Fëanor, like we said, still has a hardened heart, and he is moving on. This does hurt Finarfin's heart, and so Finarfin decides to leave. He's done. He's done following. He doesn't want to be in a part of this, and so he does start retracing his steps back to Valinor, and he receives pardon from the Valar, and he goes back to Tirion. And you can see Ethan is showing on the map that where he travels back.
So Alcolande is where the battle took place. He leaves, and he's like, this is just such wickedness, and he leaves and gets pardoned.
Well, they make it all the way up to Ahriman, and they see the dark god in Ahriman. So they're all the way. Can you show them where Ahriman is?
So they go up this way. Remember, they don't really know how to sail, so they're not quite sure. Like, they're a little scared to just go straight across here. So they come up this way where it's a smaller channel.
Coming, and those of you who are listening, they're going up along the coast of Valinor, and not quite crossing the big.
Getting closer to Helcaraxe.
Yeah, they're just going up north along the coast. So, so Finarfin goes back to Tirion, and he becomes the king of the rest of the Noldor that stay, the small amount of the Noldor that stay in Valinor. He seems like the smart one.
The least rash, at least.
Yeah. So you can pull that map up again,
right.
Because the rest of the host does.
Do you want this one or the other one?
No, that one. The rest of the host does make it up north. They realize that they either have to cross the Great Sea, or they have to go where the way that we said Morgoth went on the grinding ice of Helcaraxe. So this makes Fëanor halt, and they debate the next course of action. They do think that they have too few ships, and that Helcaraxe is too dangerous. So they're kind of like, either way, it's not going to work. So Fëanor, in his evilness, he decides they're gonna just leave swiftly and leave Fingolfin and Fingolfin's host in Ahriman, and they slip away secretly and take the boats. Remember, we said there wasn't enough boats for everyone, so Fëanor's just taking his people. He doesn't care about Fingolfin, and they at last land in Middle Earth, called Drengist. So
now, real quick, so when they go to Ahriman and they see a dark figure giving a prophecy, it's an assumption it's Mandos, but they don't know that for sure. He gives a chilling prophecy and curses them and says, "You are not welcome back in Valinor." This is after what they did to the Teleri, the wicked war they did. And he's like, our wrath is on Fëanor and all who follow him. He's like, you may not be able to get sick, but you can die, and you will die by being slain. And you guys will be shadows compared to the younger race that will come, is what this dark prophet comes from the Valar and says. That's when Finarfin leaves and says, I'm sorry, I need to go back. And then it causes a lot of chatter between Fingolfin and Fëanor. Like, okay, what should we do now? This is a lot. And so that's when Fëanor, it's like, I am leaving Fingolfin and his people, and I'm just taking my loyalist followers, and we're going. So he pulls them into this situation. He makes them attack the elves. He gets them all the way up to Ahriman, and then he takes the ships and leaves them.
Yeah, so Fingolfin's like following him because he feels like he has to, and then he gets left. So at this point, Fëanor is in Middle Earth in Drengist. So let's see if we can show you where Drengist is.
Go to the first map real quick. So it's click right there. So see that little firth? Yeah, right there. So that's the Firth of Drengis. and then we'll go to the map of Beleriand. That'll show it better right there.
Right here.
Yep. So
So
that's
they
right
kind of
south
came
of
into
Lamoth.
this.
But yeah, they took it as far as the sea went into the land is where they went.
So, Fëanor's son Menegroth, he thought that, we're going and then we'll send a few people back with the ships and bring the rest of the people back. But Fëanor did not have this in mind. He decides to call for the ships to be burned. So the ships are burning. Fingolfin sees that Fëanor is not coming back for him and his people. And instead of getting discouraged and being like,
No,
fine.
he was quite discouraged because basically Fëanor left him in a situation where he has told off the Valar, and then, but now he can't follow Fëanor either. They're stuck. So it's like, do we just go with and ask for peace from the Valar after the prophecy, or what do we do now? Like he really screws him over here.
Yes, I guess I'm saying he doesn't like go back to. I say he's not discouraged because he doesn't go back to Valar with his tail under his.
Well, that
legs.
was the assumption that Fëanor thought he
yes,
left them with.
This actually puts a fire under him, and it makes him not want to return to the Valinor, but to face Fëanor again. And so they decide to do the very scary and harrowing journey across the grinding ice, or Helcaraxe, the one that Morgoth did. And so
yeah, Fingolfin and his band of the Noldor, they go across the Helcaraxe. Only Valar have gone across it. Valar and Maiar have gone across this before.
You can see here it says the grinding ice. So it's really dangerous. But
so they were left here at Araman, and then they see the ships burning over there.
Sure, but ships burning over here.
And so then they make this bold move that we're not going to go back to Valinor at this point. We've burnt our bridge there, and we're coming over to Middle Earth.
Yeah. So Fingolfin and his host finally set foot in the Outer Lands. So they are now in Middle Earth too, and that ends chapter 9. So a lot of travel happens, and a lot of dissension happens as well. Did you have any other comments on chapter 9?
Let's see. I just one or two things. So Fëanor says after Mando, so the Prophet of Doom says, you guys are really are exile. You can't come back. He's like, you know what? At least we're not cowards. And he's like, we're gonna do great things. And that's when he leaves, and that's how he leaves the Valar there with those words. And then let's see here. An important note is that one of the sons of Turgon, who's the son of I can't remember if it's Finarfin or Fingolfin. It's probably Fingolfin, I assume. He loses his wife Elenwe as they cross the Helcaraxe. They say many perish, including his wife. So that's probably something to note. So Turgon, son of Fingolfin. So anyway, but you can imagine that Fingolfin has no love for Fëanor's folks anymore. So they're going to the same continent as them, but man, they have some beef between them now.
Yeah. And you can tell he has a fire under him, and he is going to avenge himself, I think.
Well, they still have an oath to follow him. I don't think they want to kill him, but he definitely needs to confront him.
Yes. So, that ends the chapter 9, kind of talking about why the Noldor left Valinor. And then we go to chapter 10. And chapter 10 is kind of setting up for the Noldor to come back into Middle Earth, into the Beleriand area. So we're kind of going back in time in chapter 10, and we're learning more about the Sindar Elves. Did you want to set up the Sindar Elves a little bit before we get into this chapter?
Yeah, we can try. If you could pull up the map of Beleriand again. So the Sindar Elves, and that means gray elves is what Sindar means. They were elves that had made it on the crossing, essentially when they started the journey from Cuivennen, which is way not even on this map of Beleriand here. So they had made it to around this area, And this was also, I don't know if you remember the story of Thingol. He is their king. He becomes Elu Thingol, and then his wife Melian, who's a Maiar. So they have that interesting chapter where they just run into each other and they just hold hands for 500 years. No time is given, but a long time. So anyway, that's where they kind of make it to. And so now we're getting reintroduced to the characters we left when we went to Valinor. Like, how's life been going in Middle Earth? So I'm very interested in this too, because it's like, I don't think they have light, so I think they've been living by starlight. I don't believe, because the lamps were destroyed earlier. The trees of Valinor, I don't believe shone over there. So
No, they only made it to like the island.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Teleri were on.
Yeah. So anyway, yes. So back to the Grey Elves.
Yeah, the Grey Elves in Beleriand, and like we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, lots of map work happening. We felt like this chapter, especially of all the chapters we've read, really needed a map, because it was very hard to be like it was very hard to visualize anything without looking at a map. So once again, we would encourage you to pull a map out or get on our
And we'll
YouTube.
link the ones we're using, but this one of Beleriand is very helpful from the onering.net. This one is very helpful. I had one in the back of my book as well. But that's one thing I found going through the Silmarillion. There's so many names and places that if you can follow on a map, it really helps you put things together and you don't feel as overwhelmed.
Yeah, so the chapter starts out that the elves are living in Beleriand and there was a life of joy. And then it just goes to the second age of the captivity of Melkor. The dwarves come into the story. And so this, they come over the Blue Mountains into Beleriand. They called themselves the Khazad, but the Sindar called them the Naugrim, stunted people, or the Gonhirim, masters of stone. If I was a dwarf, I would rather be known masters of stone. They dwell on the eastern side, and I'm going to pull up a map right now because none of this will make sense unless you look at a map.
And that's an interesting thing I've also noted reading Tolkien is he gives like 3 or 4 names, but then he usually by a few pages in, he starts only using one of those names. And so that helps kind of get context of what you need to know and whatnot as well.
So Ethan's going to be showing us around the map while I talk about them.
Oh, and real quick, I did note that Melian was actually making the stars shine brighter with a silver fire. So
the stars were still shining.
They were shining in Middle Earth, and she made them shine brighter than normal. So you don't have a sun, but you have very bright stars.
Oh, nice.
So, anyway.
So, like we said, the dwarves, they came over the Blue Mountains. Can you show us where the Blue Mountains are?
The Blue Mountains would be down here.
And
so that's not quite on this map, unfortunately.
And for those of you listening, that's down south. They dwelt on the eastern side. When they came into Beleriand, they dwelt on the eastern side of Ered Luin in the cities of Gabagathol and Tumen-Zahar.
Belagrost and Nolgrad are actually the names that they're going to be referred to.
Yeah, the elves call it Nograd.
And Belagos. These 2 cities here are where they make it into Beleriand. And this whole map is really Beleriand.
Yeah.
Hence why it says Map of Beleriand.
And the greatest of all, it does mention that the greatest of all the mansions of the dwarves was Khazad-dûm in the Misty Mountains.
Which is far south here and is not introduced in Beleriand.
You're very far south, and most of the elves think it's a myth because they've never seen it. So we can pull the map away for a second. The elves were very shocked when the dwarves came to Beleriand because they thought they were the only people that could speak or only creature that could speak and use their hands. And so they see the dwarves and they're like, where'd you come from? And they couldn't understand each other's languages. I do find it interesting that the dwarves were more interested in learning. I feel like that comes from Aule. Aule loved to teach and teach his children. And so they were more interested in learning about the elves. So they learned the elves language and they lived close to the elves, but the elves never came and visited their cities or anything. They created a road that passed under the shoulder of Mount Dolmed and followed the course of River Ascar. So we can pull a map up again and show you. Here's the River Ascar here, and so this is you. It even says, if you look closely, it says like the name of the road there. And King Thingol welcomed the dwarves, and the dwarves were very fond of the Noldor Elves because of how much they loved Aule, and the gems of the Noldor they praised above all their wealth. Any comment on that?
What I had is the dwarves did not like to teach new people their language.
Oh, that's another reason why
they like to keep it more
Interesting.
private. They didn't mind learning the elves' language if it meant they could keep theirs a little secretive. Is more what I
That's
got
how you
it.
read it.
Yeah. And so they loved working with iron and copper, and they really start really big trading relationships. So they build that initial road, and there's a lot of trade that's going to happen between these two peoples, starting now and in several other chapters.
So Melian, as we've said before, she's a Maiar, and she has foresight.
And for those that don't remember, Maiars are the helpers of the Valar. They are kind of a subcategory of Valar. They're not as powerful, but they are a spiritual, powerful being created. They were with Iluvatar, what came down to help the Valar.
So she, with her foresight, she counsels Thingol that this piece of Arda that they're experiencing is not going to last. And so this makes him want to build a dwelling that is strong and can withstand the enemies. So he decides to seek the counsel of the dwarves, and they gladly help. They do mention that the dwarves don't like... They like payment, but they believe that Thingol and Melian have given them so much with
they consider she gives them a lot of wisdom, and so they are very grateful for the wisdom she imparts.
Yeah, and I'll mention, and they gave Thingol rewarded them with many fair pearls. The pearls were called nymphalos, and they were as large as a dove's egg, and they were very prized by the dwarves. So there were things that the dwarves were getting, and this is why they were very glad to help. They built Thingol mansions after the fashion of their own people, deep in the earth, and they built Thingol his hall at the river of Esgalduin, and built a bridge of stone over the river, which that was the only way you could enter the gates, is if you went over the bridge. The dwelling was named Menegroth, the Thousand Caves. So Thingol has always dwelt kind of in this Doriath land, and Menegroth.
Do you see it right there in the middle?
Right up here. Oh, right there. There I see it. It says Menegroth. And so it's built underneath, like we said, in the fashion of the dwarves. So there's lots of like caves going on here. Lots of big halls. It's called the Thousand Caves. That's kind of, I believe, what Menegroth means. So a great hall. I do think it's interesting. They did mention that the elves did help with this process. They brought their own labor and skill, and they wrought out the visions of Melian. So Melian has had a lot of visions of what she wanted it to look like. And so I'm just going to read it so that, because I think it was interesting of the different ways that they made the beauty. I feel like I can't describe without reading it. The pillars were hewn in the likeness of the beaches of Orome and lit with lanterns of gold. There were fountains of silver, basins of marble, and floors of many colored stones. Carven figures of beasts and birds ran up the walls and climbed upon the pillars. Over the years, Melian and her maidens filled the halls with woven hangings where you could read the deeds of the Valar. So lots of beauty, and I feel like the elves brought in that beauty, whereas the dwarves would have brought in more of the stonework and the strength.
So quite a big fortress. And then as I think we get into the next part, I assume Addie's going to get to, it's like, well, why do you need such a fortress? Because that was my question. It's like, okay, wait a minute. What's been going on in Middle Earth with no Valar there and a large amount of people there? But Melkor was chained for 3 ages. So I was like, so what's going? Is it like a very peaceful place? And so apparently the elves can reign, but there are a lot of beasts and things that are still around. An evil beast that they do have to fight. So they do have swords, they do have weapons, and obviously they want fortresses too. So they do kind of know they do know there's enemies.
Yes, I was getting to that. We're not quite to where they made the weapons yet. But we'll get there. So when Menegroth was finished, there was a lot of peace in the realm. The dwarves were coming over the mountains, and they were had free reign of Beleriand. They were afraid of the sea, though, so they would not go very far towards the sea. And as the third age of captivity of Melkor drew near, this is when the dwarves become very frustrated with the Valar that they haven't completely rooted out all the evils in the north. Because they dwell in the mountains, I think they're seeing a lot of the evil coming out of there, I believe. There's they said there's wolves and orcs and things that look like wolves or come in the shape of wolves. So there's a lot of evil, like you were saying, a lot of evil creatures. And so this makes Thingol start thinking about creating weapons. And so the dwarves do help in the creation of these weapons for Thingol, and the elves use their craft as well. And so it just says the Sindar were well armed.
And they made armor as well.
Yeah. I didn't put that in there, but I yeah.
Well, apparently,
I
like their chainmail they talk about in there is like very.
Oh yeah, the dwarves. You're right.
The dwarves
you
were able to make
me.
something very, very unique with their chainmail and all their little links together, and so that. Yeah, that was another thing that they praise the dwarves highly for, and that gift to the elves, or that working partnership with the elves to acquire that great armor becomes very, very helpful.
The book then kind of says that there is a group of elves led by Linwë. There are some of the elves that forsook the march of the Eldar when the Teleri were halted before the Teleri left Middle Earth. If you remember, the Teleri were the last of the elves to make it to Valinor. So Linwë never made it to Valinor, and his people. They don't really know much of their wanderings, but they did hear Thingol's cry or warning that things were getting, things were getting darker. And so they, Thingol did ask them to come, and they said that they were welcomed to Doriath and to stay there. Did you have anything about the runes in that was a confusing section. This part of this section that the runes were part of the Linwë elves.
Are you talking about the language?
Yeah, the book mentions that Dairon the minstrel divides runes, and the dwarves learned them and were well pleased with the device.
Yeah, it seemed I didn't quite get that as well. It seemed like there were letters and things that were I was like, are these spells or something? So like they brought some form of knowledge in runes and characters to the dwarves. And I didn't quite get, like, is this just to learn the language? It seemed more powerful than that. And
it did.
And I don't know.
This was one of those times where I was like, I feel like this thought wasn't fully written
like
out.
Maybe he was thinking of like incorporating somewhere else, and maybe he does later on. But as of right now, a little lost by. So this group of elves that had kind of gone farther south of Beleriand shows up again, and I think part of it was because things were getting bad. A lot of beasts were attacking them. And so Thingol's like, look, I got weapons and armor. And so they move up and kind of live closer to Thingol now. And so they kind of reintegrate into Beleriand. But yeah, they have this source of knowledge that the dwarves value. I didn't quite get what it was.
It seemed like, the way it's explained, it does seem like that they actually write down things, and it says that the dwarves learned this and they liked that, but the Sindar did not use runes or for the keeping of records.
So it's like, there was a written language. They were the inventors of a written language.
So they were writing the language. Okay. But it does say that the Sindar they just kept it, because in their heads we never die, so they're like, we don't need to write this down because we'll all remember it.
That's a good point. An oral history works great if no one ever dies.
Yeah, it said much was just held in the memory, and then sadly it says and perished in the ruins of Doriath. So the ruins of Doriath. So when Doriath falls, which we don't know when that's going to happen, but that's really sad. So as of right now, these were days of beauty and peace. However, they do know that darkness is probably coming. Do you know what the Sindar's first warning of Melkor's return was?
Ooh.
What was something very loud that Melkor
They
did?
could hear that. They could hear Lamont and Lamoth, the cries. Yeah.
They could hear the cries of Melkor, and this is when Ungoliant flees and comes from the north into the realm of Thingol. But she was stayed by the power of Melian, and she did not enter into Neldoreth, but stayed a long time under the shadow of the precipices in which Dorthonion fell. It became known as Ered Gorgoroth, or the Mountains of Terror.
And we showed those earlier.
Okay, the Mountains of Terror.
Yes, where she breeded a bunch of spiderlings and whatnot.
Oh yeah, we did show that. So, this is kind of the first. She didn't attack anything, but they know that there's some evil around with her coming into, in there. Morgoth was back in Angband up in the north of the very far north. He found that his orcs had multiplied in the darkness and that they had grown strong. And so all of a sudden, there was this great army that just appears in Beleriand. So Morgoth sends forth his orcs. And they came down on either side of Menegroth between Kelon and Gelion. And we are going to show that to you. The cursor is still here on Menegroth. Gelion is the river, right here.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
here's Kelon.
Is this Gellion here? Is that right
This
there?
is the river Gelion. It says in between Kelon and Gelion, the west between Sirion and Nargon. So they come on this side of Morgoth, and then, or not Morgoth, Menegroth. Those words are close. And then they also come on this side. Do you see the river Sirion or Narog?
I think there's Narog is this one here.
So they're coming on both sides of where, right here, where
and so
King
it's
Thingol.
Ered Gorgoroth, where non Dungorotheb. That's where Sheila made a
Ungoliant?
Yes, Ungoliant made a bunch of terrible kin, and so north is where Morgoth is in Angband, up there, and so they avoid that and come around on either side.
So essentially, they're coming over to Menegroth on this side, on the west, and coming over on this side on the east. Did I get that right? Yeah,
I believe you got that right. That is my understanding of what Tolkien's saying is happening here.
Thingol calls upon Denethor because he was cut off by Kieran. Can you tell us who Kieran and Denethor are?
I can try. So Denethor is this. He was the elves we referred to earlier, led by Lenwë. He was Lenwë's son, and so this huge army comes in. So pull up that map again. So when they are given reign to, they retreat to Beleriand, Lenwë and his son Denethor. And they're like, hey, you can stay with us. And so they go and settle in Osiriand. And that's kind of, you see, it's protected by several rivers. Mountains on one side. I believe it doesn't show forest on this map, but I believe there are forests there because they're called the Green Elves later on. So he essentially says, come up and help us fight. We need your reinforcements here. And then Círdan, I don't exactly know where Círdan was. They said Círdan was in the west. So I think he was maybe like somewhere here.
And because he was west, it's cut off. So remember, the orcs are coming down this way. He's probably over here.
So essentially now you have 3 armies of good and then 2 armies of bad, and they're all surrounding each other at this point. Or the good armies now are surrounding the bad armies. So they're getting reinforcements from both sides.
So Denethor comes and helps Thingol, and the elves come in force, and they fight the first battle in what is called the War of Beleriand. The orcs were actually utterly defeated, and those that fled north were killed by the axes of the dwarves that came from Mount Dolmed, and few returned to Angband.
Indeed. I think it's pretty interesting here that this army came out of nowhere. They've really not had organized warfare before in this continent, so they're really shocked. They call everyone, we need help, and so they do defeat the dwarves. They defeat them pretty easy. The orcs, thank you. The dwarves help. The dwarves help them.
The dwarves are still there.
The dwarves help defeat the retreating orcs, and so one of the things noted was that the troops from the elves from Osirian did not have armor, and they lost a lot of men. And so they retreat to Osirian. They become the green leaves, the green elves, because they cover themselves with leaves, because they don't want to be seen, and they don't really come out a whole lot more after that. That was a very terrible battle for them. The others, particularly in Menegroth, have armor, and so they don't die as easy. But a lot of the green elves died.
They do mention that Denethor, who is the leader of these green elves, he was surrounded upon the hill of Aman Arab, and so he dies there with a lot of his nearest kin. This is their leader, and they're so sad. They go back to Osirian, and then they never have a king again because they're always mourning their leader Denethor. They clothe themselves with leaves. They're called the Lyquindi, which just means green elves. But I forgot about that point, that they didn't have armor, so
they took heavier losses than everyone else did.
Yeah. And there are many that did go north and enter the guarded realm of Thingol and merge with his people too. So they didn't all stay in Assyrian, but the ones who stayed in Assyrian did not take another king, and they just lamented.
And they're the ones called the Lyquindi, the green elves.
Yeah, they called them that. So.
And how was the guarded? Why is the forest guarded at this point?
Did I skip something?
Just Melian. She creates a shield around the forest that basically makes it so no one can enter unless they're more powerful than her. And it's called the Girdle of Melian, or the Land of the Girdle.
Didn't she do that when Ungoliant came? Did I forget to mention that?
Her power keeps Ungoliant away. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if maybe that's when she decided she was going to make something more permanent. But at this point, she does put something more permanent in place. And so that basically leads to this whole protected area in Beleriand, where the Grey Elves, the Sindar, operate from. And so they've kind of, though, if you look at, can you pull the map of Beleriand up again? If you look at the map, this whole area, you sort of have elves kind of in this whole area, and then they've basically said, this is our fortress, we retreat here. So there are people around here, but they stopped investing in settlements, it seems like, and other types of land conquest past that. They let enemies roam more freely in those areas. Are more dangerous because they've decided this is our protected realm.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting that they said within there was peace, but outside there was peril. So it was you definitely wanted to be inside. It was very protected, and only Melian and King Thingol could cross that the girdle.
Oh,
I also thought that the Land of the Girdle was a very funny name, but obviously they could say, like, who they wanted to pass through, but if they didn't know, only Thingol and Melian could pass through. And then at the end, it just says, this is, if you remember where we were with Fëanor, this is the same time Fëanor came over the sea in the white ships of Teleri and landed in the Firth of Dringest, and there they burned the ships at Losgar. So this same war and the creating of the girdle and everything kind of was happening as Fëanor is leaving Aman. So that leaves us at chapter 10. 9 and 10 were pretty hefty, long chapters. And like we said, really in need of a map to know what we were looking at and where everybody was going. So did you have anything else to add to chapter 10?
No, I guess the only point, not really from chapter 10, but like chapter 9, what do you think Fëanor would have done differently? How would things have gone differently if Fëanor hadn't told off the Valar first before he lost the Silmarils? If he had said, yeah, you can have the Silmarils, and then he learned they were gone, would have been more of a joint effort, you think, for them to come across? I don't think he would have definitely killed the Teleri or anything, but at this point, he's like, I've said no to the Valar, and now I hate Morgoth, and now he feels like he needs to leave. So how do you think things might have gone differently if he had either not answered yet or if he did answer and said,
If he did answer, I think it changes a bit because he would say like, "I will let you have it." That would show that his heart had softened, and that he was willing to support the Valar in their need for the light. Although Melkor had already used his evil words to get inside Fëanor's head. So I'm not sure that he might still have responded that way because I know he still had a lot. They talk the whole, like, as they start to talk about Fëanor, a lot of it is just about his strong mind and the way he thinks differently from other elves. And so I don't know if I don't know if I still feel like he would have answered pretty strongly because he was so upset that the Silmarils are gone. But I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would have been way more peaceful, and he would have felt like he was Melkor was separate from Valar. But then he decided that since he already told off the Valar, he needed to try to make the distinction that Melkor and the Valar are the same, and we need to just leave. And I feel like a lot of that was just in his lust for the Silmarils. He was willing to kill a lot of the Teleri and risk a lot of his own people for his next actions.
Yeah, he just almost felt like he was just kept getting more evil. He's like, well, if I was willing to do that, then I can go even further.
It does seem like that. Like, especially after the battle, and then he burns the ships for the folks that follow him, so we're not even coming back for them. It's like, wow, you are just doing whatever you want. And I don't know why you want that.
Did you see any connections to Lord of the Rings? And like, I like to ask that question. This one talked a lot about Beleriand, and Beleriand doesn't even exist during the time of Lord of the Rings. So it seems like it's very separated at this point.
I think the Dwarves, all those cities, I believe, still make it to Middle Earth.
Yeah, Khazad-dûm, the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, those definitely. Khazad-dûm definitely does. Moria does. I think even the ones in the east of Beleriand might still stay there too. So there's that. I assume some of these elves we hear do kind of retreat to other areas of Middle Earth, and then Angband is, I believe that. Well, that's gone too. So I was confused. I don't know why he settled in Angband and didn't go back to Utumno, his other fortress. But no, I guess that was about what I had.
I feel like in The Hobbit, especially, the green elves and the gray elves are mentioned. I feel like more so than in Lord of the Rings. So that's an interesting connection. The dwarves, you learn about their personality. I really feel like Gimli was done so well. Like, the more I hear about what a dwarf is like, it's like, that sounds like Gimli. So that's fun. And mentions Galadriel and just how she stands up and wants to leave. I find that's very interesting because she seems like a really wise leader. And yet she wanted to leave Aman. So those are the ones that I thought of, but still a story of some interesting leaders and a lot of pride. But
that's a good. That would have been a good topic as a contrast between the leadership of Fëanor and Fingolfin, and I think we see that more in the next few chapters potentially as well.
Yeah, I saw a question of like what makes a wise leader in Tolkien's world, and that might be a better question to ask as Fingolfin catches up to Fëanor.
I like that.
I'll keep that in my notes, but I think that we're seeing how people follow someone like Fëanor. So anyway, that's all I had. Did you have any?
I have nothing
questions?
else on this one. No.
Okay, next week we will be covering chapters 11 through 13. So if you are following along, read those chapters. And other than that, we'll see you next week.
Couple of Silmarils out.